particular one is a 94 325i convertible. This car that originally went for $38,000, believe it or not, was purchased for $1,000. Now granted, it wasn't a purely cash deal. The customer had purchased an old Chevy S10 that the third gear didn't work right. He paid $1,000 for that, and he traded it even for this BMW. Now, was it a smart move or not? Well, if you've been watching me any length of time, I tell you about money pit BMWs, but this is a 94. And as you can see, made in Germany, Deutschland. Back in the day, these things were built like Sherman tanks. Well, not Sherman tanks, Panzer tanks. It's got the ultra reliable straight 6-cylinder BMW engine. These old ones can run virtually forever. Now granted, the hood struts aren't working too good. Now it's not going to conk me in the head. The engine had a respectable 189 horsepower, but it's fun to drive around. This thing still gets 26 miles a gallon on the highway. The advantage of this engine is it's extremely smooth, 200-something thousand miles on it, and it still purrs. Listen to it. Yeah, they used to build them good in Deutschland. And this one has had exhaust modifications, so it makes a nice sound. Not outrageous, conservative noise. A nice sound, yet 249,338 miles on this baby. And for those who want to have fun, but don't want to be shifting all the time, it's got an automatic transmission in it. Now this automatic transmission is a 4-speed. It's very dependable. It is a classic front engine 6-cylinder, straight 6, automatic transmission, and rear wheel drive. Of course, over the years, guys have souped them up, but even in the stock format, it's got a top speed of 142 miles an hour. It is a serious little car. And this particular one, sure, it's got a lot of miles on it, but it's still solid, as we're going to see when I road test it. But look at the fit and finish before we do that. This is a 94. Look at the paint. It's still the original paint, and it still pops. Although I do have to say, I always hated plastic bumpers. They're ugly. If this was chrome, this car would really pop a lot better. And check it out, the convertible top's still in decent shape. Unfortunately, it's got the stupid plastic back. I would want a glass one. You can't have everything in a $1,000 car. So let's remove my little steel holder that kept me from getting conked on the head and take it for a spin. In we go. And the leather seats still aren't too bad. This can be re-dyed and make it shiny. They're not all worn out and ripped, even though leather was well made in those days. And we'll see how it starts up. Starts right up. That is one solid engine. As we drive down the road, you can see it tracks quite well, even as old as it is. Let's stop it and give it a little gas. See what happens. It's still got some power left. It doesn't throw you back in the seat, but it makes a nice sound. The main thing about these cars is they are driving cars. They corner great. That still rides really smooth. And when you're stopped, yes, it's an old car, but there's no shaking. This baby is smooth as can be. Check it out. That gear shifter, you could lay an egg on there, it wouldn't roll off. Taking these things out in the country, they're just a joy to drive. It's a great car for checking out the fall foliage. If you wondered why BMW's made those straight 6-cylinder engines for so long, once you drive one, the smoothness, the nice power delivery, you'll understand why they made them so long. They don't put out the outrageous horsepower you can get with a V configuration. They have less torque, but they are so silky smooth. And when they made them as strong as they did back in '94, I've seen these things with 500,000 miles on them, and they're still running strong. An excellent design, perfected over time. Who cares about 2 or 3 miles a gallon here or there? Hey, it might be old being a '94, but to me, this car's got class. More class than a lot of new cars have. And sure, the airbags aren't working right anymore. Seatbelts work perfectly fine if you buckle them up. And originally being a Kentucky car, there's really not a spot of rust on this car. So for $1,000, I think this was an immaculate steal. And I know some of you are going to say, what, is Scotty turned into a hypocrite? He's saying a BMW is a good car? Hey, back in the day, these were very solid cars. Of course, even back then, they were expensive. Back in 1994, this was a $38,000 car. And back in 1994, you could have gotten a brand new Celica for $19,000, fully loaded. So, I mean, I only paid $350 for mine, so, you know, it's no big deal. If you could find one in this kind of shape for that kind of money, you could have a lot of fun dirt cheap. Because if you don't soup this thing up and leave it stock, it can go many years. Even with all that mileage. Engine still doesn't burn oil. Listen to that solid door. And when you realize you also got a rag top for $1,000, this was one sweet deal. Deutschland built, strong BMW. Sure, it's got almost 250,000 miles on it, but it still runs like a clock and it is fun to drive. Of course, it's a BMW, so what you really get these for are the engines. We'll open the hood. Oh, well, I forgot they open the other way. We got to move the camera. Yeah, it's been kind of sloppy. There's the compound. He's going to have to clean all that off. This is the heart of a BMW. A straight 6-cylinder fuel-injected engine. Let's start it up. Now, this is a 1988. Old as the hills. It only needs one thing. The valves adjusted. This is an old car. It's an old-style engine. It has screws, lock nuts. You have to adjust all the valves manually. It still runs good. No backfire or anything. I hear a little bit of clattering. If I owned a car like this, I'd be a fanatic. First thing I'd do would be adjust the valves. Now, we also had to change the fuel pump as old as it is. People always say, BMWs, what a pain in the butt to fix. Not these old ones. Take the seat out. It's under there in a little access panel. Not like a Ford or GM where you got to drop the gas tank. They actually were well designed back in the day. Remember, this is the 80s. This isn't 2020. Now, we also changed the brake master cylinder, but look, it's a simple system. It has a regular booster, not a nitrogen booster. It doesn't have crazy anti-lock brakes that you have to deal with. He bought the master cylinder at an AutoZone, $110. You don't have to buy BMW parts for these things. They've been around so long and there's so many interchangeable parts. There is a big aftermarket for them. What's that strange noise? Okay, it needs a blower motor too. You expect these things. But look, it's already got built-in air conditioning. It's called a convertible. All the air conditioning you'd ever need. That's a classic rear-wheel drive sports car. Let's take it for a spin. So start her up. No backup camera, but then again, it's a convertible. You got a pretty good view. Now, the first thing you notice is it idles so smooth. That's what these 6-cylinder engines are going for. Smoothness. And they last an awful long time. And with 70-something thousand miles, this thing's got a lot of life. You hear the transmission shifting? You hardly hear the transmission shift because it still works perfectly fine. This all leads me to conclude that that is the real mileage of this car. Now, of course, these things are made for the twisties. We'll wait until traffic gets out of the way. There we go. It may be old, but it still handles quite well. No problem taking corners in this thing. Now, these are the ultimate cruising vehicles. As you're going to see, we'll do a fast takeoff. They're not race cars. They're not made for racing. They're made for high-speed touring. They go, but it's not until you get to the higher end speed that they really show what they're good for. They're good for cruising along on the highway very comfortably. It's a very comfortable touring car. It does have back seats. You can fit people there. It isn't that tiny. It feels safe. It's a heavy car. It's got a lot of weight to it, but it's smooth. You can get in this thing, drive to California, and your back isn't gonna hurt you. They used to know how to make them in Deutschland. Now, yeah, this was a barn find in Tennessee out in the country. There's things lying around if you look hard enough. I really believe this is the actual mileage of the car. Sat for years, so everything's cracked and stuff, but mechanically, this thing runs like a jet engine. Now, the rear view mirror isn't here anymore, but what the heck? It's a BMW convertible. Who cares what's behind you? The only thing you care about is what's in front of you. Now, this isn't automatic, but if it had been a 5-speed manual tranny, those make pretty good drift cars. And now you know why they use these straight 6-cylinder engines all these years. They're extremely smooth, and they can basically last forever if you keep oil and coolant in them. Now, there's some smooth cruising. for only $1,500. Let's face it, on a modern BMW, you're not even gonna get a set of wheels for $1,500. And this still has the original wheels. Like I said, they used to make them good in Deutschland. Sure, they're not race cars, they're touring sports cars. They're very comfortable, they handle well, they get decent gas mileage for a vehicle that weighs as much as this thing weighs. Now, by modern standards, they're gas hogs. They only get 21 on the highway and 16 in town because they're a heavy vehicle. But on the other hand, solid, well-built vehicle. It can last a long time, and if you could find a barn find like this that's got less than 80,000 miles on it, our grandson's probably going to keep it as a toy for a while. He could sell it on and make some money, but you're not going to find that many of them, that kind of low mileage, anywhere these days. Just don't be put off by BMW's cheap plastic dashes. You can get covers for them. You can always get the back reupholstered if you want, or cover it up with something. He even painted the back trunk, but he forgot to take this ding out. And that's my one advice about classic convertibles. Don't become a fanatic. You can have fun with them, you can get them cheap enough, they're in this kind of shape, they could last quite some time. Just don't be a fanatic. You can always find something wrong with an old car. You could do it all over if you wanted, or you could do like his, make it presentable. Have fun driving it around, and don't worry. You get an old car like this in many areas, they're antiques. You can get dirt cheap insurance. Saw a guy in Rhode Island, he had one. He was paying $380 a year insurance. A classic car. You can save a lot of money if you can find a barn find with low mileage on insurance alone. Because it's a fun sports car, but it's only got 168 horsepower. Plenty enough to move it around and have fun, especially at highway speeds. But with lower horsepower comes lower insurance rates. Less chance of you going crazy and spinning out, running into a tree or something for somebody else. You have a fun car with really cheap insurance. Now, if they were still making BMWs today like they were then, I tell people to buy them. Unfortunately, they don't. You gotta get into a time machine to get a decent one like this. It's a 2015 Volvo XC70. Technically, it's called a cross-country station wagon, but as you can tell by looking at it, it's got nice lines, and really, come on, it's a station wagon. It looks like a station wagon. It is a station wagon. And unlike earlier Volvos, which are some of the ugliest, squarest, boxiest cars in the world, this thing's got some style to it. And of course the big question is, do they hold up like legendary Volvo station wagons? In the past, I had customers that got 500,000-600,000 miles out of the old Volvo station wagons. I got the original window sticker on this one. It was $48,325. Okay, so they weren't giving them away. Well, customer bought it for $14,900. And how is it held up? Now, the customer bought it with 104,000 miles on it. Let's see what it's got on now. It's got 109,000 miles on it. And a lot of people think, oh, Volvos get old, they turn into money pits. Not this thing. He's changed the oil in it. That's all he's had to do to the thing. He's thinking about beefing up the rear suspension. If he wants to drive like a maniac, he can go right ahead. It handles quite well the way that it is. It is sporty, there's no arguing that. The Swedes have learned a lot in the past. They don't just make clunky box little economy machines anymore. They make these sweet looking station wagons. And it is hard to find a station wagon these days. And you consider the original person paid 48 grand and he paid like $14,990 for the thing used. This thing's got a lot of life left in it. We'll check under the hood. It's got a twin turbo T6, straight 6-cylinder engine. A lot of people years ago forecasted the death of the straight 6. They're very solid engines. Hey, this thing gets up and goes. It's a solid Volvo vehicle, so you feel safe driving it around. Volvo was the first one to really make cars safe. So you got a fast but safe car. No, old Scotty here would have never paid 48 grand, and my customer's smart, he didn't either. You pay a lot less. Look at the shape it's in. Listen to the quality. You slam that door, it sounds like an old car door. It doesn't sound like a piece of tin or aluminum, or even worse, some of the cheap plastic cars. It's got the Volvo all-wheel drive. This baby's not going to get stuck, and hey, for a Volvo, ooh, it's got dual exhaust. So it's not phenomenal gas mileage, but it's not horrendous either. He gets about 18 miles a gallon driving in the city, and if he takes a road trip, like he did recently, he got 25 miles a gallon, which is actually pretty good for this much horsepower. I've driven brand new SUVs and crossovers. that got a lot worse gas mods than that. Didn't have nearly the power that this thing has. And of course, it's a Volvo. So if you got a family, it's family oriented. Nice black and chrome interior, but a lot of space. Tons of space. You want more space? It's got a luggage rack. You can throw a ton of luggage on there if you want. We'll check the trunk. Look at all that space. This is a space machine. You got all kinds of space in one of these things. Now, my customer bought it at a dealer, but it was a one-owner car. A couple of ladies had bought it together. They ordered everything they wanted on it, took care of it, and as soon as it was out of warranty, they traded it on another one. They obviously weren't customers of mine, because if they would have brought it to me, I would have said, do not trade that thing in and lose $35,000. It might go another 100, 200,000 miles. Relatively trouble-free. It was a foolish thing getting rid of this car just because the warranty was up. Now, if this would have been a Chrysler or a Jaguar, that'd be a smart move, but of course it'd be a dumb move to buy one of those new anyways. Now, if you can afford buying a Volvo new, go right ahead, it's your money. If you want to drive it forever, go right ahead. But it's foolish to buy one of these cars and then trade it in as soon as the warranty's gone, because they're pretty well made. They're not going to fall apart when the warranty's up. Now, if you're looking for a safe family station wagon, hey, you get that kind of a price, 14 versus almost $50,000, hey, not a bad deal. I'll show you how it works. You take it for a spin. Put it in a remote key, let's see if it starts. What a surprise, it starts right up. The AC is blowing freezing cold. Bought a car, so it's got a backup camera on it. Now it's got 109,000 miles. The first thing you notice is how quiet it is idling. Does it shake? Not one bit. And when you take off, it really feels secure. Handles quite well. Still got all the original struts, still rides fine. Being a Volvo, it's safe. It's got giant brakes. Stops on a dime. Corner's really good for something as big as a station wagon. It is all-wheel drive, so we'll punch it and see what those 300 horsepower can do. It gets up and goes. Shifts like a dream. This baby's got power. There's no arguing that. Those twin turbos, man, they kick in. This might be a station wagon, but man, it takes off like a race car. Yet with all of Volvo's safety features, it's a very safe car. Now, if I was wilder like in my young days, I'd run it into a pole just to show you how safe it was. But it's not my car. Maybe one day I'll revert back to that and knock a car out just to see what can happen. No one knows why the UPS man was stopping in the middle of the road, but that's people these days. They don't seem to know what the heck they're doing when they're driving down a road. And just check, even on a bumpy road while I'm swerving to hit the bumps. Hey, this thing is still pretty smooth. This was a well thought out station wagon. And it might have over 100,000 miles on it, but aside from a tiny bit of valve clatter, it's one smooth engine. These Volvo engines will often make a little bit of valve clatter as they age. Doesn't really mean anything. This thing goes like stink, doesn't burn any oil. The transmission shifts like a dream. These are solid built vehicles. And yeah, like everything else these days, they're extremely overpriced when they're brand new. But if you can get one in this kind of shape, one owner, was maintained at the dealer, and they just got rid of it when the warranty was up because they didn't want to have a car with no warranty. You get a car like this, I'd try to pay less, but you're never going to get a deal much better at a dealer. Let's face it, I mean, they always ask too much for cars, but you get something this clean in this kind of shape, you bite the bullet. Even I've done that myself, getting cars for my wife. See a beautiful car, runs like a dream, but they're asking a few thousand too much. Sometimes you just say to heck with it, and you buy it realizing that you're saving so much money over what the original one was. Who really cares? Now when you look behind the plate, you can see something. Came from New York, and there's a funny story. The present day owner lived there. What did he do? He took the train to the Volvo dealer, and then he road tested it for an hour. Now, he didn't own a car at the time. He took the train there. So these guys in New York trusted him, and he road tested for a whole hour. I imagine they were wondering, geez, what's this guy doing? Personally, I find that kind of interesting that they'd even do that in New York State, though I assume the dealership had insurance on the car. And maybe, this is during the COVID, maybe they were hoping he'd steal the car because nobody was buying cars and they'd get the insurance money, which of course would be full price. Maybe they wanted him to steal the car, but he did come back after an hour and then bought it. So much for In a New York Minute. These New Yorkers, hey, they let him go 60 minutes. Then he came rambling back in and bought the car. So things may not be as bad in New York as you might think. But interestingly enough, the owner of this Volvo, for a while, he lived in New Orleans. And while he was in New Orleans, he had 3 Nissan Pathfinders totaled while they were parked on the street. Well, nobody ever accused New Orleans of being a sober city, that's for sure. But he had 3 Pathfinders, and every single one was totaled by some drunk when he had the car parked on the street and he wasn't even in it. Interesting enough, he also had a Volvo that got rear-ended, but that was by one of his drunken friends who later moved to China, so nobody's going to catch him there. I'm not going to call it sports anything. It is a station wagon. It is an excellent station wagon, especially if you can be the second owner of people who took care of it the first time and save yourself a ton of money and have a $15,000 car that might go another 100, 200, 300,000 miles. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.